She was dying from hunger in space until a human offered his blood. The dying light. The warning alarm screamed through the cramped cockpit of the cargo hauler Stellar Drift as Commander Zara Voss fought to keep her ship from tearing itself apart. Sparks cascaded from overloaded panels and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the recycled air. The hyperspace jump had gone catastrophically wrong, leaving her stranded in an uncharted system with a dying engine and life support failing. "Come on, you piece of junk," Zara muttered through gritted teeth, her calloused hands dancing across the control console. Years of hauling supplies between frontier colonies had taught her to coax life from dying machines. But this was different. The engine core was hemorrhaging plasma, and her backup systems were already running on borrowed time. Through the viewport, a massive structure loomed against the backdrop of a blood-red dwarf star. The ancient research station hung in space like a metallic spider, its solar collectors spread wide to catch the fading light. Kepler Station, she'd heard whispers of it in spacer bars. Abandoned decades ago when the star began its death throes. It was supposed to be empty, stripped of anything valuable. Right now, it was her only chance. The docking procedure was brutal. With her maneuvering thrusters sputtering and main engine dead, Zara had to rely on momentum and prayer. The Stellar Drift slammed into the station's docking bay with a grinding screech of twisted metal. The impact threw her against her restraints, but she was alive, and more importantly, the station's emergency seals had engaged. Zara sat in the sudden silence, catching her breath. Her ship's life support would last maybe 6 hours. The station's systems were ancient, but they might still have power. She grabbed her emergency kit, oxygen recycler, basic medical supplies, rations and her plasma pistol, and sealed her flight suit. The station's interior was a tomb of shadows and rust. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly amber glow, and her footsteps echoed through corridors that hadn't heard human voices in 20 years. The air was stale but breathable, recycled by automated systems that somehow still functioned, despite decades of neglect. Zara made her way toward the station's core, following maintenance diagrams on her handheld scanner. If she could reach the main computer, maybe she could boost the communications array enough to send a distress signal. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, branching into darkness that her flashlight couldn't penetrate. That's when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it over the hum of ancient machinery. A whisper, barely audible, carried by the station's ventilation system. "Help!" Zara froze, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon. The station was supposed to be empty. Pirates, maybe? Scavengers who'd taken shelter in the depths? She followed the sound, moving carefully through the maze of corridors, her pulse rising with each step. The whisper led her to the station's lower levels where the research laboratories had once buzzed with activity. Now they were graveyards of broken equipment and shattered dreams. At the end of a long corridor, she found a heavy blast door marked with biohazard warnings. The door was slightly ajar, and from beyond it came the faintest glimmer of pale light. Zara pushed the door open and stepped inside. The laboratory was vast, filled with the skeletal remains of sophisticated equipment. Cryogenic chambers lined the walls, their contents long since expired or evacuated. But in the center of the room, beside a cluster of broken monitoring devices, sat a figure that made Zara's breath catch. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but clearly dying. Her skin was pale silver, almost luminescent in the dim light, and her long hair was the color of starlight, white with hints of blue and violet. She wore the tattered remains of what might once have been an elegant dark robe, now stained and torn. Her eyes, when they opened at Zara's approach, were the deep purple of nebulae, but it was her obvious suffering that stopped Zara from immediately drawing her weapon. The woman, if that's what she was, could barely lift her head. Her breathing was shallow, labored, and her hands trembled with weakness. "Please," the stranger whispered, her voice like distant music. I don't want to die alone." Zara approached cautiously, her scanner detecting no immediate threat. "Who are you? How long have you been here?" The woman's violet eyes focused on her with effort. My name is Nith. I've been waiting. So long. Decades, maybe longer. Time flows, strangely when you're starving. Starving? Zara knelt beside her, noting how the woman's skin seemed to glow faintly from within. I have food, water. No. Nith interrupted, her voice barely audible. Not that kind of hunger. That's when Zara saw them, the delicate fangs that showed, when Nith spoke, sharp as crystalline needles. Understanding hit her like a cold vacuum breach. Vampire. The word seemed impossible, a relic from ancient Earth folklore, but the evidence was undeniable. Zara's hand moved to her weapon, but something stopped her. Nith wasn't threatening her, wasn't even looking at her with hunger. Her eyes held only desperate hope and the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting a losing battle for too long. You're afraid, Nith whispered. I understand. I would be too. Are you going to attack me? Zara asked bluntly. A ghost of a smile crossed Nith's lips. I barely have the strength to speak. Besides, I don't take by force. Never have. Her voice dropped even lower. It's why I'm dying. Zara studied the woman's face, searching for deception and finding none. How long since you've fed? 37 years, 4 months, 16 days, Nith replied without hesitation. I count every sunrise through the observation deck. 37 years? Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. How are you still alive? We're difficult to kill, Nith said with bitter humor, but not impossible. Starvation works, just slowly. The moral weight of the situation settled on Zara's shoulders like a lead blanket. Here was a being, asking for something that should terrify her, and yet, Nith had spent decades choosing slow starvation over violence. That spoke to something fundamental about her character. What happens if I say no? Zara asked quietly. Then I continue to die, Nith replied simply. And you try to repair your ship and leave. I won't stop you. And if I say yes? Nith's eyes widened with desperate hope. Then you live. I only need a little, enough to restore some strength. I won't take more than you can spare, I swear it. Zara was quiet for a long moment, weighing impossible choices. Her rational mind screamed warnings. Vampires were predators. This could be a trap. She could die or worse. But her instincts, honed by years of reading people across a dozen worlds, told her that Nith was telling the truth. If I help you, Zara said slowly, I need to know what I'm dealing with. Are there others like you? Nith's expression darkened. Yes, but they're not like me. They take what they want, when they want it. She paused, seeming to gather strength. I was exiled for refusing to hunt innocents, for believing we could coexist with humans rather than prey on them. And they just let you leave? They thought watching me starve would be amusing, Nith said bitterly. A lesson to others who might develop inconvenient consciences. Zara made her decision. She pulled out her emergency med kit and found a sterile lancet. How much do you need? Nith's eyes went wide with disbelief. You'll help me? Against my better judgment, yeah. Zara pricked her finger with the lancet, watching a bead of crimson blood well up. But we do this my way, controlled. And if you try anything, I won't, Nith breathed. I promise I won't. Zara held out her finger. Then take what you need. Nith's hand shook as she reached for Zara's hand. Her lips were cool against human skin, but the sensation wasn't painful or invasive. It was oddly gentle, almost reverent. Zara felt a slight dizziness as Nith drank, but it passed quickly. After only moments, Nith pulled away, her eyes already brighter. Thank you, she whispered, and for the first time since Zara had found her, she was able to sit up without support. You stopped, Zara observed, checking her finger. The wound was already clotting. I told you I would. Nith's voice was stronger, now though, still weak. I've learned control the hard way. Color was returning to Neth's silver skin, and the glow beneath it was growing stronger. She looked more alive than she had minutes before, though still far from healthy. How long before you're back to full strength? Zara asked. Days, maybe weeks, depending on... Nith stopped mid-sentence, her head snapping toward the laboratory's entrance. Her newly brightened eyes went wide with terror. What is it? They found me, Nith whispered, scrambling to her feet with newfound strength. We have to go, now. From somewhere in the station's depths came a sound that made Zara's blood freeze, a howl that was part rage, part hunger, and entirely inhuman. It was answered by another, then another, echoing through the corridors like the cries of hunting wolves. Who found you? Zara demanded, drawing her plasma pistol. The Blood Clan, Nith said, grabbing Zara's arm. The ones who exiled me, they must have tracked the scent of fresh blood. Another howl, closer this time. Zara's mind raced. Her ship was damaged. The station was a maze, and now they were being hunted by creatures she didn't understand. How many? She asked. Too many, Nith replied. And unlike me, they don't hesitate to kill. The sounds were getting closer. Footsteps, voices speaking in a language that seemed to twist reality around it. Zara grabbed her emergency kit and looked around the laboratory for another exit. There, Nith pointed to a maintenance hatch near the floor. The service tunnels, it's our only chance. As they crawled into the narrow tunnel, leaving the pale light of the laboratory behind, Zara couldn't help but wonder if helping the dying vampire had saved a life or doomed them both. Behind them, something howled again, and this time it was close enough to shake dust from the tunnel walls. Hunters in the void. The maintenance tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare of twisted metal and exposed conduits. Zara crawled forward on her hands and knees, following Nith through passages barely wide enough for a human body. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, voices speaking in that alien tongue, the scrape of claws on metal, and occasionally, a bone-chilling howl that seemed to vibrate through the station's superstructure. How far? Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the station's humming machinery. The central hub is 3 levels up, Nith replied, moving with surprising grace despite her recent weakness. If we can reach the transit tubes, we might make it to your ship. A thunderous crash echoed through the tunnels, followed by the screech of tearing metal. The Blood Clan wasn't bothering with stealth anymore. They're ripping the station apart, Zara muttered. They don't care about the station, Nith said grimly. Only about making me suffer before they kill me, and anyone who helped me. They emerged from the tunnel into a maintenance bay, where ancient repair drones hung from ceiling tracks like mechanical bats. Nith moved to a wall panel, her fingers dancing over controls that should have been beyond her knowledge. How do you know the station layout so well? Zara asked. I helped design it, Nith admitted, not looking up from the panel. 70 years ago, before everything went wrong. The panel flickered to life, displaying a schematic of Kepler station. Nith traced a route with her finger. The transit tubes here, and here. If we can reach the primary shaft, it goes directly to the docking level. A new sound joined the cacophony of pursuit, the whine of energy weapons. The Blood Clan was cutting through barriers, following their scent with methodical precision. They're fast, Zara observed, checking her plasma pistol's charge. How fast are we talking? Faster than humans, Nith said quietly. Stronger too, and they don't tire. She looked at Zara with something approaching guilt. I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into this. Save the apologies for later, Zara replied. Right now, I need to know what we're facing. How many? What are their capabilities? The hunting pack is led by Kex the Ravager. He's ancient, even by our standards. The others... Nith paused, her face pale. They call themselves the Blood Clan because they've abandoned everything else. No art, no culture, no restraint. Just hunger and violence. And they exiled you for having a conscience? They exiled me for refusing to participate in the Crimson Harvest, Nith said bitterly. A systematic culling of human colonies in the Outer Rim. I tried to warn the settlers instead. The maintenance bay's lights flickered as something powerful moved through the station's superstructure. Dust rained from the ceiling, and Zara felt the deck plates vibrate under her feet. "We need to move," she said. They slipped out of the maintenance bay into a corridor lined with observation ports. Through the reinforced glass, the dying red dwarf cast everything in bloody light. In the distance, Zara could see the asteroid field where she'd planned to hide if her ship had been functional. There, Nith pointed to a heavy blast door marked with transit system symbols. The tube entrance. They were halfway across the corridor when the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Zara heard Neith gasp. "They've reached the power core." Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. And in that crimson illumination, Zara saw them. 3 figures stood at the far end of the corridor, moving with liquid grace. They were tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and faces that might once have been beautiful but were now twisted by centuries of predation. Their eyes burned like dying stars, and when they smiled, their fangs were like crystalline daggers. "Found you, little exile," the center figure spoke, its voice like grinding metal. This had to be Kex. Ancient authority radiated from him like heat from a furnace. "And you brought us a treat." Zara raised her plasma pistol, but Kex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Human weapons," he sneered. "How quaint." He moved, and Zara understood why Nith had been so afraid. Kex crossed 20 meters of corridor in the space between heartbeats, his claws reaching for Zara's throat. She pulled the trigger, the plasma bolt catching him center mass, but he barely staggered. That's when Nith struck. The exiled vampire slammed into Kex from the side, her own claws extending like silver knives. They went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the deck in a blur of violence. Nith was faster than Zara had expected, but Kex was stronger, and he had allies. "Run!" Nith shouted, even as Kex's claws raked across her chest. "Get to your ship!" Zara wanted to help, but she could see the other 2 vampires advancing, their movements predatory and patient. She reached the transit tube door and slammed her hand on the emergency release. The massive portal began to iris open with agonizing slowness. Behind her, Neith screamed. Zara spun to see Kex holding the silver-skinned woman by the throat, his claws piercing her skin. Dark blood, almost black in the red emergency lighting, trickled down Nith's neck. 37 years of starvation and you waste your first feeding on a human. Kex snarled. "You always were weak." "Better weak than monster," Nith gasped. Kex's grip tightened and Zara saw murder in his burning eyes. Without thinking, she raised her plasma pistol and fired. Not at Kex, but at the observation port beside him. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed, then shattered. The station's atmosphere began venting into space with a roar, like thunder. Emergency. Bulkheads started to descend and the 3 vampires were forced to release Neith as they struggled against the sudden hurricane of escaping air. "Now!" Zara shouted. Nith rolled away from Kex and dove through the transit tube entrance just as Zara hit the seal control. The iris door snapped shut, cutting off the sounds of rage from the corridor beyond. The transit tube was a transparent aluminum cylinder that ran through the station's core. Normally, automated pods would carry passengers, but the system had been offline for decades. They would have to traverse it manually, in zero gravity. "Can you make it?" Zara asked, noting the dark blood staining Nith's torn robe. "I'll have to," Nith replied, though she was clearly in pain. "Kex will find another way around. He knows this station as well as I do." They pushed off from the tube entrance, floating through the transparent tunnel toward the docking level. Below them, through the station's skeletal framework, Zara could see her damaged ship waiting in the docking bay. "Even if we reach the stellar drift, she won't fly," Zara said. "The engine core is slag." "The station has repair facilities," Neith replied. "If we can reach the engineering deck." She stopped, mid-sentence, her eyes widening with terror. Through the tube's transparent walls, dark shapes were moving through the station's superstructure. The Blood Clan had found another route. "They're cutting us off," Nith whispered. Indeed, as they watched, 2 of the vampires emerged into the docking bay below, moving with purpose toward Zara's ship. But it was what happened next that made Zara's blood run cold. One of them, a female with bone-white skin and hair like spun shadow, began to change. Her limbs elongated further, becoming spider-like. Her fingers extended into razor-sharp talons, nearly a foot long. Her jaw unhinged like a serpent's, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "What the hell is that?" Zara breathed. "Battle form," Nith said quietly. "We can adapt when we need to hunt. Can you do that?" Nith looked away. "I've forgotten how. It requires embracing the hunger, becoming the predator completely. I can't." The transformed vampire began climbing the station's superstructure with inhuman agility, heading directly for their transit tube. At the same time, Kex appeared at the tube's far end, having found his way to the upper levels. They were trapped. "The emergency pods," Nith said suddenly, pointing to a junction where several tubes intersected. "There are escape pods at the hub junction. If we can reach them, can they make it to my ship? If we're lucky." They pushed off hard, accelerating through the tube toward the junction. Behind them, Kex entered the tunnel, his form beginning to shift and elongate as he prepared for pursuit. Below, the transformed female vampire continued her relentless climb. The hub junction was a spherical chamber where 6 transit tubes met. Ancient escape pods hung in launch cradles, their systems blinking standby lights. Zara examined the nearest pod's control panel. "These things are 70 years old," she muttered. "No telling if they'll even launch." "Better than being torn apart by the Blood Clan," Nith replied, watching the approaches nervously. Zara began the startup sequence, her fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. The pod's systems were sluggish but functional. Behind them, she could hear Kex approaching through the tube, his claws scraping against the walls. "Almost there," she said. "Just need to." The female vampire burst through the junction's deck plating like a metallic spider, her transformed limbs moving with mechanical precision. She landed between Zara and Nith, her unhinged jaw opening wide. "Fresh meat," she hissed in a voice like escaping steam. Nith stepped forward, placing herself between the monster and Zara. "Vex, don't do this. She's innocent." "Innocent?" The creature that had been called Vex laughed, the sound echoing strangely from her distorted throat. "She helped you, exile. That makes her fair prey." Vex struck like a viper, her elongated arms reaching for Zara, but Nith was faster, catching the attacking limbs and twisting with desperate strength. The 2 vampires went down in a whirlwind of claws and fangs. "The pod!" Nith shouted, even, as Vex's talons raked across her back. "Start the launch sequence." Zara's hands flew over the controls. The escape pod systems came online with ancient reliability, its small engine beginning to warm up. But the launch would take precious seconds they didn't have. Kex arrived through the transit tube, his own form beginning to shift and expand. Behind him came 2 more members of the Blood Clan, their eyes burning with anticipation. "Enough games," Kex snarled. He raised his hand, and Zara saw something impossible. Crackling energy danced between his fingers, like controlled lightning. "I grow tired of this chase." The energy bolt struck Nith, sending her flying across the junction chamber. She hit the wall with a sickening crack and slumped to the deck, her silver skin flickering weakly. "Nith?" Zara started toward her, but Vex blocked her path, grinning with too many teeth. "Your turn, human." That's when something extraordinary happened. As Zara looked at Nith's broken form, at the monsters closing in, at the certain death that awaited them both, she felt something change inside her. The blood Nith had taken, such a small amount, had apparently left more than just a wound. Heat flooded through Zara's veins like liquid fire. Her vision sharpened until she could see individual dust motes floating in the air. Her hearing became so acute she could distinguish each vampire's heartbeat. And her muscles felt like coiled steel cables. "Impossible," Kex breathed. "The transformation doesn't work on humans." Zara smiled and felt her own fangs descending. "Looks like your exile taught you wrong." She moved with speed that surprised even her, ducking under Vex's reaching claws and driving her fist into the vampire's elongated torso. The impact sent Vex flying across the chamber, but Zara was already turning toward Kex. The ancient vampire's eyes widened with something approaching respect. "Interesting, but you're still new, still weak." He gestured, and more of that crackling energy leaped toward Zara, but her enhanced reflexes allowed her to dodge, the bolt scorching the wall behind her. She rolled, came up beside the escape pod's control panel and hit the emergency launch. "Nith," she called. "Now!" The silver-skinned vampire stirred, her violet eyes focusing with effort. She saw the launching escape pod and understood. With the last of her strength, she threw herself toward the pod's hatch just as Zara caught her. They tumbled into the pod together as its tiny engine fired, blasting them out of the junction chamber, and toward the docking bay. Behind them, Kex's roar of rage echoed through the station. The pod's trajectory was perfect, carrying them in a shallow arc toward the stellar drift. But as they approached, Zara saw the problem. The other members of the Blood Clan were already aboard her ship waiting. "They're in the cargo bay," she said, watching dark shapes move behind the ship's viewports. "Can you fight them?" Nith asked weakly. Zara flexed her hands, feeling the new strength flowing through her veins. "I guess we're about to find out." The escape pod crunched against the stellar drift's hull, its magnetic clamps engaging with the ship's airlock. As the seal pressurized, Zara checked her plasma pistol and looked at Nith. "Stay close," she said. "And if this goes bad—" "It won't," Nith replied, struggling to her feet. "You're not human anymore, Zara Voss. You're something new, something they've never faced before." The airlock cycled and they stepped aboard the stellar drift. In the cargo bay, 3 vampires waited with predatory smiles. But Zara Voss was no longer the stranded cargo hauler who had stumbled onto Kepler Station. She was something else now, part human, part vampire, and entirely dangerous. The real fight was about to begin. As the cargo bay lights flickered and the vampires advanced, Zara felt Nith's hand slip into hers. Together they faced the darkness, ready to carve out their own destiny among the stars. Behind them, through the ship's viewports, Kepler Station continued its slow orbit around the dying red dwarf, while somewhere in its depths, Kex the Ravager planned his revenge, but that would be a battle for another day. Right now, there were monsters to fight, and Zara had just discovered she was very good at it.